There is a currency more valuable than the dollar, more precious than gold, and more finite than any resource we can drill from the earth. It is the one asset that cannot be bought, cannot be negotiated for, and once spent can never be refunded. This currency is time. The average executive in the United States will spend, over the course of their career, more than 21 hours per week in meetings. That's more than half their working life spent sitting in a room, often listening to information that could have been an email, debating decisions that have already been made, or providing updates that serve no strategic purpose. It is a slow, silent hemorrhage of life's most essential capital. Now, consider a man who oversees a commercial empire with a market capitalization that rivals the GDP of developed nations. A man whose decisions move markets and whose portfolio includes dozens of iconic American companies, from railroads to insurance giants, from candy makers to battery manufacturers. That man is Warren Buffett. And his calendar, on most days, is almost completely empty. This isn't a quirk. It isn't a privilege of age or success. It is the cornerstone of a management philosophy so radical, so counterintuitive to modern corporate culture, that it feels like a secret whispered from another dimension. Buffett's profound, almost religious aversion to meetings is not about personal preference. It is the most visible symptom of a deep-seated belief system that has powered the relentless growth of Berkshire Hathaway for over half a century. His thesis is simple and devastating. Most meetings are a sign of organizational disease. They are a tax on productivity, a substitute for thought, a diffuser of responsibility, and the most egregious thief of that one irreplaceable asset. By avoiding them, he isn't just saving his own time, he is architecting a system built on the pillars of decentralization, radical trust, and a ferocious bias for action over performative bureaucracy. This isn't just a lesson for CEOs managing billion-dollar enterprises. It is a fundamental reevaluation of work, value, and efficiency that applies to the entrepreneur in a garage, the manager leading a team, and the individual employee trying to carve out a space for meaningful work in a world obsessed with the appearance of being busy. We are about to deconstruct the operating system of the world's greatest investor, not to learn how he picks stocks, but to understand how he builds empires by weaponizing the one thing we all have in equal measure, the 24 hours in a day. We will explore the 5 pillars of this philosophy, a blueprint that will challenge every assumption you have about collaboration, communication, and the very nature of effective leadership. This is the logic of why Warren Buffett rarely, if ever, attends a meeting. The first and most fundamental pillar of Buffett's entire operational philosophy is his profound reverence for the sanctity of time. To him, it is not just a resource, it is the ultimate resource, the denominator against which all other opportunities are measured. Money, he has often said, is something he can always make more of. Time is a fixed endowment trust fund, with each day depleting the principal. Meetings, in his worldview, are the highest risk, lowest return investment one can make with this precious capital. This isn't just an abstract idea, it is a lived reality, meticulously engineered into his daily existence. The stories of Buffett's Spartan schedule are legendary because they stand in such stark contrast to the chaotic, overscheduled lives of nearly every other high-level executive on the planet. A foundational anecdote that perfectly illustrates this principle involves his long-standing friendship with Bill Gates. When Gates first sought to meet Buffett, he was skeptical. He thought, what would he even talk about with a guy who just picks stocks? He allocated a mere half hour for the meeting in his own packed schedule. That meeting, famously, stretched into 10 hours of non-stop conversation, sparking one of the most significant friendships in modern business. Years later, Gates reflected on the single most important lesson he learned from his mentor. It wasn't about investing in moats or understanding balance sheets. It was about time. Gates, a man whose life was scheduled down to the minute, once showed Buffett his calendar, a dizzying mosaic of commitments, calls, and conferences. Buffett, in response, pulled out his own diary. It was almost entirely blank. "You've got to keep control of your time," Buffett told him, And you can't unless you say no. You can't let people set your agenda in life. This wasn't a boast, it was a diagnosis. Buffett saw Gates's calendar not as a symbol of importance, but as a symptom of a man who had ceded control of his most valuable asset to the demands of others. This philosophy manifests in the physical reality of his life in Omaha. The headquarters of Berkshire Hathaway, a company worth over $800 billion, occupies a single floor in a nondescript office building. The staff is famously skeletal, numbering fewer than 30 people. There are no departments for strategic planning, no business development teams, no layers of vice presidents scheduling endless review meetings. Buffett's personal office is modest, famously lacking a computer or a stock ticker. His primary activities are simple: reading and thinking. He estimates he spends as much as 80% of his day just reading annual reports, trade journals, newspapers. He is not reacting, he is learning. He is not managing, he is allocating capital. A meeting, by its very nature, is an interruption of this deep, focused work. It pulls him from the world of signal, the hard data in a 10K report, the long-term industry trends described in a trade publication, into the world of noise, of opinion, of consensus building and social ritual. Another telling story involves a prominent investment bank that, for years, tried to get Buffett to join its board of directors. The offer was prestigious and came with a 7-figure compensation package for what would amount to attending a handful of meetings a year. He politely but firmly refused every single time. When asked why he would turn down such a lucrative and influential position, his logic was unassailable. He calculated the number of hours required for the board meetings, the travel time to and from New York, and the time needed to prepare. He then weighed that block of time against what he could accomplish with it in Omaha. The conclusion was simple: the opportunity cost was too high. The time spent in those boardrooms, even for millions of dollars, was time he could not spend reading the report that might lead to his next $10 billion acquisition. He wasn't just turning down a board seat, he was making a conscious decision to invest his time in the highest yield activity he knew: thinking. This is the essence of his approach. Every single hour on his calendar must justify its existence, and the bar for that justification is astronomically high. The underlying psychological principle at play here is a masterful, intuitive grasp of two powerful concepts: opportunity cost and Parkinson's law. For most people, opportunity cost is an abstract economic idea. For Buffett, it is a visceral, daily reality. He understands that the cost of doing one thing is the value of the next best thing you could have done instead. The true cost of a 2-hour budget meeting isn't just the 2 hours of salary paid to the attendees. It's the brilliant idea that wasn't conceived, the critical flaw in a strategy that wasn't found, the game-changing acquisition that wasn't analyzed. Because his highest value activity is deep thought and analysis, literally anything that prevents that, especially something as notoriously inefficient as a corporate meeting, represents a catastrophic opportunity cost. He is engaged in a constant, ruthless triage of his time, and meetings almost never make the cut. The average executive sees an empty block on their calendar as a vacuum to be filled. Buffett sees it as a sanctuary to be protected. The second principle, Parkinson's law, is the cynical but depressingly accurate observation that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Meetings are the petri dish in which this law cultures and multiplies. Schedule a meeting for an hour, and the conversation, no matter how trivial, will magically stretch to fill 60 minutes. Schedule it for 30 minutes, and the same work will be accomplished in half the time. Meetings create their own work. There are pre-meetings to prepare for the meeting, and post-meetings to debrief what was decided in the meeting. They are self-perpetuating bureaucratic organisms. Buffett's refusal to participate is a form of institutional chemotherapy. By not attending meetings, he starves this organism of its most important nutrient, the attention of leadership. He signals throughout his entire multi-hundred-billion-dollar empire that the primary measure of value is not time spent in conference rooms, but results generated in the real world. This is a powerful antidote to the corporate tendency to conflate activity with progress. So how can someone who isn't a billionaire investor apply this principle? The first step is a mental model we can call the ruthless time audit. This is a practical, step-by-step blueprint for reclaiming your schedule. For 1 week, you must track every 30-minute block of your workday. Don't just record what you did, you must categorize it. Category A is high-value work, deep, focused activity that directly contributes to your most important goals. For a writer, this is writing. For a programmer, it's coding. For a leader, it's strategic thinking and mentoring key people. Category B is necessary overhead, answering critical emails, essential administrative tasks, and brief, highly focused, decision-oriented meetings. Category C is low-value distraction, pointless meetings, scrolling through non-essential emails, bureaucratic paperwork, and any activity that feels like performative work. At the end of the week, you calculate the percentages. Most professionals are shocked to find that Category A constitutes a tiny fraction of their time, while Category C has metastasized to consume the majority of their week. The second part of the blueprint is to implement the no default calendar. Your calendar's default state should be empty, a blank canvas for high-value work. Every single proposed meeting, especially a recurring one, must be treated as a hostile invader that has to pass a series of brutal tests to gain entry. First, the ROI test. What is the specific, measurable outcome of this meeting, and is a synchronous gathering the only possible way to achieve it? Could this be an email, a shared document, or a one-on-one 5-minute phone call instead? Second, the agenda test. There must be a clear, written agenda distributed at least 24 hours in advance, stating the questions to be discussed and the decisions to be made. No agenda, no meeting. Third, the attendee test. Every single person in the meeting must have an active role in either contributing to or making the decision. Anyone who is there just to be kept in the loop should be removed and sent a summary afterward. Implementing this system is an act of war against corporate norms, but it is the first step toward achieving the kind of productivity and control that Buffett embodies. It's a foundational element of effective leadership and personal time management. To truly appreciate the genius of Buffett's approach, we must examine its antithesis, the path walked by the overwhelming 99% of corporate culture. This is the path of the culture of busyness. In this world, a packed calendar is not a liability, it is a status symbol. It is visible proof of one's importance. The mid-level manager with back-to-back meetings from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. is seen as indispensable, a critical node in the corporate network. The reality, however, is that they are often just the opposite. A bottleneck, a human router passing information back and forth, with no time for the deep thought or creative work that would actually move the business forward. Imagine a product manager named Sarah at a large tech company. Her official job is to guide the development of a new software feature. Her actual job, as dictated by the culture, is to attend meetings. At 9 a.m. she has the product team daily stand-up. At 10 a.m. the marketing product sync. At 11 a.m., the engineering resource allocation meeting. After a lunch eaten at her desk while answering emails, she has a 1 p.m. UX design review, a 2:30 p.m. cross-functional stakeholder alignment call, and a 4 p.m. Q3 roadmap planning session. She leaves the office at 6 p.m., her brain fried from a day of constant context switching. She hasn't done any work yet. The actual work, writing product specifications, analyzing user data, thinking strategically about the competition, has to be done in the evenings or on the weekend. This culture of busyness creates a vicious cycle. Because no one has time for deep work during the day, problems that could be solved by one person thinking for an hour instead require a meeting of 8 people for 2 hours to hash out. This, in turn, clogs everyone's calendar even more. It leads to burnout, mediocrity, and a complete lack of innovation. The organization isn't moving forward. It's just spinning its wheels in a flurry of performative activity. The direct financial connection of this philosophy is both staggering and simple to calculate. Businesses can and should quantify the cost of a meeting. The formula is straightforward. Number of attendees multiplied by average blended hourly salary multiplied by meeting duration. Let's take Sarah's 2:30 p.m. cross-functional stakeholder alignment call. There are 8 people on the call. Sarah, 2 other product managers, a lead engineer, a marketing manager, a designer, a data analyst, and a director of product. Let's be conservative and say the average fully loaded salary of this group is $100 per hour. The meeting is scheduled for 90 minutes. The direct salary cost of this single meeting is 8 people x $150 for 1.5 hours equals $1,200. That's $1,200 of direct payroll burned, assuming the meeting was even productive. Now, let's factor in the opportunity cost. That lead engineer, one of the most valuable assets in the company, could have spent those 90 minutes solving a critical architectural problem that would speed up development time by 3%. The marketing manager could have been crafting a campaign that increases lead conversion by 1%. The director could have been mentoring a junior PM, increasing the long-term capability of the entire team. The lost value is not just the $1,200 in salary. It is potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost innovation, speed, and growth. When you multiply this by the dozens of similar meetings happening every day across a 1,000-person organization, the financial drain is colossal. It's a multi-million-dollar tax on the company's bottom line, hidden in plain sight. Buffett's empty calendar isn't just a personal preference. It is a multi-billion-dollar competitive advantage. He understands that time, not money, is the ultimate engine of wealth creation, and he refuses to pour it down the drain of a pointless meeting. This is a core lesson in business efficiency that every entrepreneur and CEO must internalize. The second pillar that allows Buffett to operate with an empty calendar is a concept that is as radical as it is powerful: the decentralized empire, a business model built on a foundation of radical trust. If the first pillar is about protecting one's own time, this pillar is about refusing to waste the time of others. The structure of Berkshire Hathaway is unlike any other conglomerate on Earth. It is less a centrally managed company and more a federation of autonomous businesses, each run by a CEO who is given near total control over their own destiny. Buffett's role is not to manage. It is to allocate capital and to select the managers. Once those 2 decisions are made, his work is largely done. He believes that meetings, oversight committees, and quarterly reviews are instruments of distrust. They are systems you create when you don't believe the people in charge can do their jobs effectively. By eliminating this entire apparatus, he creates a culture of extreme ownership and accountability. A foundational anecdote that serves as the genesis story for this entire philosophy is the acquisition of the Nebraska Furniture Mart in 1983. The company was founded by a Russian immigrant named Rose Blumkin, better known as the legendary Mrs. B. She built a colossal, wildly profitable business from a pawn shop basement with an ethos of sell cheap and tell the truth. Buffett had been a long-time admirer of her business acumen. One day he went to see her and, after a brief conversation, asked her how much she wanted for the company. She named a price. Buffett agreed on the spot. He purchased a 90% stake in the company for approximately $55 million. There were no armies of auditors from a private equity firm combing through the books. There were no due diligence teams from an investment bank. There was no lengthy negotiation process. Buffett wrote the check based on a handshake and his assessment of 2 things: the quality of the business and the unimpeachable character of its operator. The deal was famously scribbled on a single piece of paper, but the most remarkable part happened after the acquisition. Buffett's instructions to Mrs. B were, in essence, keep doing exactly what you've been doing. He didn't install a new management team. He didn't impose a Berkshire way of doing things. He didn't demand she fly to Omaha for monthly performance reviews. He left her completely alone to run her business, just as her son Louis would later be left to run it. Mrs. B, well into her 90s, continued to show up to work every day, competing fiercely even against the very business she had sold. This was decentralization in its purest form. Buffett bought a great business run by a great manager and understood that the most intelligent thing he could do was get out of the way. His job wasn't to improve the Nebraska Furniture Mart, it was to not screw it up. This story has been repeated dozens of times with companies like See's Candies, Flight Safety, and ISCAR. Hire the best, trust them completely, and let them work. The underlying psychological principle that makes this model so potent is known as the Pygmalion effect or the Rosenthal effect. This phenomenon, proven in numerous studies, demonstrates that our expectations of others can become self-fulfilling prophecies. If a teacher is told that certain students are gifted, those students tend to perform better even if they were chosen at random. The teacher's higher expectations are communicated through subtle cues, greater attention, and more challenging assignments, which in turn elicits a higher level of performance from the students. Buffett is a master practitioner of the Pygmalion effect on a corporate scale. When he acquires a company and tells the CEO, "I trust you completely. You don't need to report to me, call me only if you have a problem you can't solve," he is communicating the highest possible level of expectation. He is not just delegating tasks, he is bestowing a mantle of trust and ownership. This psychological vote of confidence is incredibly motivating for high achievers. They are not working to please a boss or to hit arbitrary quarterly targets set by a distant corporate office. They are working to validate the immense trust that one of the world's most respected investors has placed in them personally. This fosters a level of commitment and passion that no amount of micromanagement or a matrix of key performance indicators could ever hope to replicate. It turns a job into a calling and a manager into a steward of a legacy. This is a leadership skill of the highest order, transforming the mundane act of management into a powerful psychological force. The applied mental model that translates this philosophy into a practical blueprint for any leader is what we can call the Mission and Guardrails framework. It's a system for effective delegation that moves beyond simply assigning tasks to fostering true autonomy. It's based on Buffett's famous aversion to lengthy, bureaucratic business plans, preferring a simple, clear articulation of the business logic. Step 1 is to define the mission. This is a crystal clear, concise statement of the desired outcome, not the how, but the what. For a sales team, it might not be make 50 calls a day. It might be increase market share in the Western region by 15% within 12 months. The mission should be ambitious, measurable, and focused on the result, not the process. Step 2 is to establish the guardrails. These are the absolute non-negotiables, the bright red lines that cannot be crossed. Buffett has two main guardrails for his CEOs. First, protect and enhance the reputation of Berkshire Hathaway at all costs. And second, inform him immediately of any bad news. Your guardrails might be related to brand integrity, customer service standards, ethical conduct, or budgetary limits. The key is that they are few in number and absolute in their authority. Step 3, and this is the most crucial and most difficult step for most managers, is to get out of the way. Once the mission and guardrails are set, you must resist the urge to meddle, to check in constantly, or to dictate the specific tactics. You must trust your team to figure out the best way to navigate within the guardrails to achieve the mission. This framework provides clarity and freedom simultaneously, and it's a powerful tool for any entrepreneur or executive seeking to scale their leadership and stop the cycle of endless meetings. To fully grasp the revolutionary nature of this trust-based model, we must look at its antithesis, the command and control structure that dominates 99% of the corporate world. This is the world of micromanagement. Picture a founder of a moderately successful software startup. Let's call him Mark. In the early days, Mark wrote the code, made the sales calls, and handled customer support. His hands-on approach was essential, but now the company has 50 employees. Mark, however, still operates as if it's a 5-person company. He insists on being in every product development meeting, offering his opinion on minute details of the user interface. He demands to be CC'd on all communication with major clients, often jumping in to correct his sales team's approach. He requires his marketing manager to get his personal approval for every social media post. The result is a massive organizational bottleneck. Decisions that should take minutes now take days, as everyone waits for Mark's approval. His talented, ambitious employees become frustrated. They feel disempowered and untrusted. The best ones, the ones who crave autonomy and ownership, eventually leave to join competitors or start their own companies. The ones who remain are the ones who are comfortable being told what to do. Innovation grinds to a halt because no one is willing to take a risk without Mark's blessing. The company's growth stalls, not because of market conditions or a bad product, but because the founder's inability to transition from a doer to a leader has choked the life out of the organization. This is the fate of countless businesses, a cautionary tale about the failure of a management philosophy rooted in a lack of trust. The direct financial connection of Buffett's decentralized model is profound and multifaceted. The most obvious benefit is the dramatic reduction in corporate overhead. The tiny headquarters staff of Berkshire Hathaway is a direct result of this philosophy. There are no legions of MBAs in a central strategy office, second-guessing the decisions of the operating companies. This saves tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year in salaries, benefits, and office space, compared to other conglomerates of a similar size. This is a direct, quantifiable contribution to Berkshire's famous low-cost operational structure. But the more significant, albeit harder to quantify, financial advantage is speed and agility. In the contemporary business environment, speed is a weapon. A decentralized Berkshire subsidiary, like Iskar Metalworking, can identify a new market opportunity in Asia, develop a product, and launch it before a competitor's proposal has even made it through the third of 5 required committee approvals at their global headquarters. This ability to act quickly, to pivot without permission, allows Berkshire's companies to seize opportunities and respond to threats with a nimbleness that belies their size. This agility translates directly into market share, revenue growth, and ultimately a higher enterprise value. The lack of bureaucracy is not just a cultural preference. It is a carefully cultivated competitive advantage that manifests directly on the income statement and the balance sheet. It is the financial fruit of a business model built on the radical and radically profitable foundation of trust. The third pillar, which serves as the bedrock upon which the entire system of trust and decentralization is built, is Buffett's rigorous and uncompromising managerial test. He can afford to avoid meetings and grant near-total autonomy because he is extraordinarily disciplined about who he allows into the Berkshire Hathaway fold in the first place. His famous criteria for hiring and for assessing the leaders of the companies he acquires are deceptively simple. He looks for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And, as he famously warns, if you don't have the first, the other 2 will kill you. This isn't a platitude. It is a rigid, non-negotiable filter. The entire no-meeting high-trust model would instantly collapse without an obsessive focus on the character of the people at the helm. He is not just investing in businesses, he is investing in people, and his due diligence on their character is more strenuous than any financial audit. A powerful foundational anecdote that embodies this principle is the story of Ajit Jain, the man who runs Berkshire Hathaway's reinsurance operations, arguably one of the most complex and critical parts of the entire empire. Jain, who was born in India, had no background in insurance when a friend recommended he meet with Buffett in the mid-1980s. Buffett met with him one Saturday morning, and after a brief conversation was so impressed by his raw intellect and clarity of thought that he hired him on the spot. He essentially handed Jain the keys to a kingdom, giving him the capital and the authority to build a reinsurance business from the ground up. Over the next 3 decades, Ajit Jain would build one of the largest and most profitable reinsurance operations in the world, generating billions upon billions of dollars for Berkshire shareholders. He did this with almost zero oversight from Buffett. Jain is known for his incredible discipline, his intellectual honesty, and his willingness to walk away from deals that don't meet his stringent profitability criteria, even when competitors are rushing in. The level of Buffett's trust in Jane is absolute. At one Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, Buffett uttered what is perhaps the highest praise he has ever given another executive. He told the thousands of shareholders present, "If Charlie Munger, I, and Ajit were in a sinking boat, and you could only save one of us, swim to Ajit." This wasn't hyperbole. It was a clear statement of value. Buffett recognizes that a manager like Jane, a rare combination of brilliant intelligence, relentless energy, and absolute unshakable integrity, is a far more valuable and irreplaceable asset than even the founders of the company. The story of Ajit Jain is the ultimate testament to Buffett's philosophy. Find a person of supreme talent and character, give them a canvas, and then step aside to let them paint a masterpiece. The underlying psychological principle that Buffett masterfully employs in his selection process is an inversion of a common cognitive bias known as the halo effect. The halo effect is our tendency to let one positive trait of a person color our perception of all their other traits. For example, we often unconsciously assume that an attractive person is also intelligent and trustworthy. In the corporate world, this often manifests as resume bias. A hiring manager sees Harvard MBA and Goldman Sachs on a resume, and the halo effect kicks in, leading them to assume the candidate is also a great leader, has high integrity, and is a creative problem solver. Buffett actively fights this. He inverts the principle by making one trait, integrity, the foundational gateway through which all other traits must pass. His famous formulation that intelligence and energy without integrity are dangerous is a profound psychological insight. A smart, energetic person with low integrity is not just ineffective, they are a weapon aimed at the heart of the company. They will use their intelligence to find clever ways to cut corners, to manipulate numbers, and to enrich themselves at the expense of the shareholders. They will use their energy to pursue reckless, ego-driven acquisitions that destroy value. Integrity in Buffett's model is not just another positive attribute on a checklist, it is the multiplier. A person with 10 out of 10 intelligence, 10 out of 10 energy, and 10 out of 10 integrity has a value of 1,000. A person with 10 out of 10 intelligence, 10 out of 10 energy, and 1/10 integrity has a value that is not just low but deeply negative. They are a liability that will eventually blow a hole in the company's balance sheet and reputation. His focus on this single trait above all others is the master key that unlocks his ability to build a decentralized, high-trust organization. The applied mental model that Buffett gives his managers to ensure they operate with this level of integrity is a simple but brilliant ethical framework known as the newspaper test. He has articulated this many times. He instructs his CEOs that they should contemplate any business decision by asking themselves if they would be comfortable with that action being written up in detail on the front page of their local newspaper, to be read by their family, their friends, and their neighbors. This is not a legal test or a regulatory test. It is a reputational and social test. It's a powerful tool for ethical reasoning because it forces a shift in perspective. It moves the decision out of the abstract world of financial projections and corporate jargon and into the concrete world of social accountability. To apply this blueprint to your own executive decision-making, you can follow a simple three-step process. Step 1. Before making a significant decision, pause and clearly articulate the action you are about to take. Write it down. Step 2. Visualize this action described, without spin, as the headline story on the front page of a newspaper you respect. Imagine the article includes quotes from people affected by your decision: employees, customers, community members. Step 3. Read this imaginary article through the eyes of the person whose opinion you value most in the world: your spouse, your child, your mentor. If you feel a sense of pride and confidence, proceed. If you feel a knot of shame or anxiety in your stomach, you must stop and reconsider. The newspaper test is a simple, potent algorithm for ensuring that your actions are aligned with your long-term integrity, which, as Buffett knows, is the most valuable asset any leader possesses. To see the power of this model, we need only look at the antithesis, the path of the 99% who hire for resumes, and a vague notion of culture fit. The modern corporate hiring process is often a box-checking exercise. Does the candidate have a degree from a target school? Do they have experience at a brand-name competitor? Do they interview well and give the right answers to behavioral questions? This process selects for pedigree and polish, not necessarily for character. The notion of culture fit is often even more pernicious, becoming a code word for hiring people who look, think, and act just like the existing team, which leads to groupthink and a lack of diverse perspectives. The most catastrophic example of prioritizing pedigree over principle is the story of Enron. In the late 1990s, Enron was the darling of Wall Street. It was hailed as one of the most innovative companies in the world. Its executive ranks were filled with brilliant, energetic people, many with MBAs from the top schools in the country. They were intelligent, they were energetic. What they lacked was a collective sense of integrity. The culture, led from the top by executives like Jeffrey Skilling, encouraged a win at all costs mentality. They used their immense intelligence to create complex, fraudulent accounting schemes to hide debt and inflate earnings. They used their relentless energy to bully analysts and silence internal dissent. When the entire house of cards collapsed in 2001, it wasn't because the people at Enron were stupid or lazy. It was because the company had systematically selected for and promoted individuals who lacked a moral compass. Enron is the ultimate cautionary tale, a multi-billion-dollar testament to Buffett's warning. Intelligence and energy without integrity will, without fail, destroy you. The direct financial connection of Buffett's hiring philosophy is a concept from economics known as agency costs. In any public company, there is a potential conflict of interest between the managers, the agents, and the shareholders, the principals. Managers might be tempted to use company funds for lavish perks, pursue empire-building acquisitions that benefit their own prestige but not the bottom line, or manipulate earnings to maximize their own bonuses. To combat this, companies spend billions of dollars on agency costs. These include the costs of auditing, layers of board oversight, complex executive compensation rules, internal compliance departments, and legions of lawyers. These are all mechanisms designed to keep the agents honest and aligned with the principals. By making unimpeachable integrity his #1 hiring criterion, Buffett dramatically reduces, and in many cases nearly eliminates, these agency costs. He doesn't need a massive internal audit department to police his CEOs because he has selected people who would never dream of cheating the company. He doesn't need rigid, bureaucratic rules governing capital expenditure because he trusts his managers to think like owners. This is a massive hidden financial advantage. The money that other companies spend on policing their own people, Berkshire Hathaway can deploy into new investments. The time and energy other boards spend on compliance and oversight, Buffett and Munger can spend on thinking about the next big acquisition. This reduction in agency cost, driven by a relentless focus on character, is one of the secret, unquantifiable ingredients in the magic formula of Berkshire's long-term outperformance. The fourth pillar of the Buffett management philosophy, which flows logically from the principles of trust and decentralization, is his unique approach to communication. In an age of information overload, constant connectivity, and a corporate culture that prizes instant responsiveness, Buffett operates on a paradigm of communication by exception. His style is characterized by profound silence, punctuated by moments of extreme clarity and brevity. He understands that in a world drowning in noise, the rarest and most valuable commodity is a clear signal. By communicating infrequently, he ensures that when he does speak, his words carry immense weight. This approach is the antithesis of the modern CEO who is constantly on television, tweeting, and holding town hall meetings. Buffett's power comes not from the volume of his communication, but from its density and rarity. The most telling foundational anecdote for this pillar is not a single story, but a recurring, 50-year-long tradition, the Buffett annual letters to shareholders. These letters are his primary mode of communication with the owners of his company. Unlike the quarterly earnings calls of most public companies, which are often sterile, jargon-filled recitations of numbers followed by a carefully managed Q&A with analysts, Buffett's letters are masterpieces of long-form, candid communication. They happen only once a year. This scarcity is a deliberate choice. He doesn't believe in the corporate ritual of providing quarterly earnings guidance, which he sees as a short-term game that encourages bad decision-making. Instead, he uses the annual letter to educate his shareholders, to explain his thinking in detail, to admit his mistakes, and to lay out his long-term vision for the company. The letters are written in plain English, with wit and homespun wisdom, accessible to a schoolteacher in Nebraska as much as to a hedge fund manager in New York. The communication is asynchronous, he writes. You read. There is no back and forth. For the CEOs of Berkshire's subsidiary companies, the communication is even more sparse. Many have reported that they might only speak to Buffett on the phone once or twice a year. The purpose of these calls is almost never a check-in or a status update. The call happens when there is a major capital allocation decision to be made or a serious problem that needs his input. Otherwise, the default state is silence. The silence is not a sign of neglect. It is the ultimate expression of trust. It says, I have hired you to do a job. I trust you are doing it. You do not need to waste your time preparing reports and presentations to prove it to me. The underlying psychological principle at work here is the critical importance of the signal-to-noise ratio. This concept, which originates in information theory, measures the strength of a desired signal relative to the level of background noise. A high signal-to-noise ratio means the information is clear and easily understood. A low ratio means the signal is drowned out by irrelevant noise. The modern corporate environment is a realm of catastrophically low signal-to-noise ratio. The average knowledge worker is bombarded with hundreds of emails a day, constant notifications from chat platforms like Slack or Microsoft Teams, and a relentless stream of meeting invitations. The truly important information, the signal, is buried under an avalanche of noise. It becomes impossible to distinguish the urgent from the trivial. Buffett's communication philosophy is a ruthless, systematic effort to maximize this ratio. By communicating so infrequently, he ensures that every word is a pure signal. When an email or a phone call comes from Warren Buffett, it is, by definition, important. It cuts through all other noise. Silence, in this context, becomes a powerful managerial tool. It creates the space for his managers to think, to focus, and to operate without the psychic burden of constant reporting. It communicates trust more effectively than any employee empowerment seminar ever could. He is not just managing communication, he is managing the attention and focus of his entire organization, which he rightly views as a critical and finite resource. For the viewers seeking to apply this principle, the relevant mental model is the one phone call rule. This is a blueprint for leaders to redefine their communication protocols with their teams, designed to eliminate noise and empower subordinates. The rule is simple to state but requires discipline to implement. You tell your direct reports. My default assumption is that everything is going well and that you are handling your responsibilities effectively. You have one primary reason to call me. You have encountered a significant problem that you have already thought about deeply and cannot solve on your own. For everything else, I trust you to manage it. Step 1 of this model is to clearly define what constitutes a real problem. This is not a minor setback or a daily challenge. It is a bet the company issue, a major strategic threat, a significant legal or reputational risk, or a capital allocation decision above a certain high threshold. Step 2 is to establish a protocol for all other forms of communication. Instead of constant check-ins, you move to a brief, asynchronous weekly update. This can be a single email with 3 bullet points: key accomplishments for the week, top priorities for next week, and any roadblocks where they might need support. This takes 5 minutes to write and 5 minutes to read, replacing hours of pointless status meetings. Implementing the one phone call rule is a powerful step towards becoming an effective leader who operates like Buffett. It forces you to delegate properly, it forces your team to develop their own problem-solving skills, and it frees up everyone's time and mental energy to focus on high-value work. This is one of the most impactful productivity hacks a manager can deploy. The antithesis to this disciplined approach is the always-on communication culture that now pervades 99% of modern businesses. It is a culture fueled by technology and a misguided belief that more communication equals more alignment and productivity. Consider a typical marketing department. The team uses Slack for instant messaging, and there are dozens of channels. #general, #campaign-ideas, #social-media, #website-updates, #random. Throughout the day, these channels are a constant stream of notifications, questions, comments, and GIFs. The expectation, spoken or unspoken, is for instant responses. This environment creates a state of continuous partial attention. No one can focus on a single complex task, like writing compelling ad copy or analyzing campaign data, for more than a few minutes without being interrupted by a notification. Deep work becomes impossible. The team is highly communicative, but not necessarily productive. They spend more time talking about the work than doing the work. This culture creates a constant, low-level anxiety. The green dot next to your name on the chat app becomes a symbol of your availability and, by extension, your commitment. Stepping away from the keyboard for an hour to think feels like an act of dereliction. This always-on approach is the enemy of creativity and strategic thought. It prizes reactivity over proactivity and creates a workforce that is excellent at responding to notifications but terrible at solving truly hard problems. The direct financial connection of Buffett's quiet approach lies in its ability to unlock the full potential of a company's intellectual capital. For most modern businesses, especially in the knowledge economy, the primary asset is not machinery or real estate, it is the collective brainpower of its employees. The value generated by a software engineer, a strategist, or a designer is directly proportional to their ability to engage in deep work, long, uninterrupted periods of intense concentration. The cost of interruption is not linear. A study by the University of California, Irvine, found that it takes an average of over 23 minutes to get back on task after being interrupted. A programmer who is pulled out of a complex coding problem for a 5-minute quick question doesn't just lose 5 minutes, they lose a half hour of productive time. A workplace culture with constant meetings and notifications effectively shatters the workday into tiny, unproductive fragments. A quiet, focused environment, which Buffett's philosophy naturally cultivates, is like providing the perfect growing conditions for intellectual capital. An engineer who gets a 4-hour block of uninterrupted time is not merely 4 times as productive as one who gets 4 one-hour blocks. Their output might be 10 times more valuable because they can tackle a level of complexity that is impossible with constant context switching. The financial benefit of this deep work is immense. Faster innovation, higher quality products, fewer bugs and errors, and a more engaged and satisfied workforce. Silence, in a business context, is not an absence of activity. It is the prerequisite for the kind of high-value activity that truly drives long-term financial success. The fifth and final pillar of the Buffett management philosophy is perhaps the most crucial, as it addresses the very purpose of work itself. It is the creation of a culture of action over a culture of performance. In this context, performance does not mean results. It means the act of performing, of looking busy, of participating in the rituals of corporate life. Buffett has engineered an entire ecosystem that is ruthlessly optimized for tangible outcomes, while systematically dismantling the bureaucracy and performative activity that plague most large organizations. He understands that in many companies, meetings are not about making decisions. They are a form of corporate theater where employees demonstrate their engagement, managers assert their authority, and responsibility is carefully diffused. Buffett's world has no time for this theater. He is interested only in the final box score. The foundational anecdote that reveals Buffett's ferocious bias for action in a crisis is the Salomon Brothers scandal of 1991. At the time, Berkshire Hathaway was a major shareholder in the powerful Wall Street investment bank. It was discovered that a rogue trader had been submitting false bids in U.S. Treasury auctions, a massive violation of federal law. The scandal threatened to destroy the firm overnight, as the Treasury Department was considering banning Solomon from future auctions, which would have been a death sentence. The firm's leadership was paralyzed. In this moment of extreme crisis, the board begged Buffett to step in as interim chairman to save the company. What he did next is a masterclass in action-oriented leadership. He did not form an investigative committee. He did not schedule a series of strategic offsites. He did not hire a team of consultants to manage the crisis communications. He flew to New York, took direct control, and acted with surgical precision. His first move was to communicate his core principles with absolute clarity. He famously told the employees, "Lose money for the firm, and I will be understanding. Lose a shred of reputation for the firm, and I will be ruthless." This one sentence instantly realigned the entire organization's priorities. He then went directly to the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, not to make excuses, but to pledge total cooperation and outline the immediate, decisive steps he was taking to clean house. He fired the individuals responsible, overhauled compliance procedures, and staked his own personal reputation on the firm's future conduct. He solved a bet-the-company crisis not through endless deliberation, but through a handful of swift, high-leverage actions. He understood that in a crisis, bureaucracy is a death sentence. Decisive action, rooted in clear principles, was the only path to survival. The underlying psychological principle that explains this focus on action is a nuanced understanding of action bias and a commitment to a high say-do ratio. Action bias is our innate psychological tendency to favor action over inaction, even when inaction is the more rational course. In investing, Buffett is famous for fighting this bias, preaching a philosophy of lethargy bordering on sloth, where the best move is often to do nothing. However, in the context of business operations and management, he fosters a culture that harnesses a different kind of action. It's not about being busy, it's about being effective. This is where the concept of the say-do ratio comes in. The say-do ratio is the measure of how often you follow through on what you say you will do. In a typical corporate culture, the say-do ratio is frighteningly low. Meetings are filled with talk of action items and next steps that are promptly forgotten as soon as everyone rushes to their next meeting. The saying is mistaken for the doing. Buffett's decentralized system is designed to maximize the say-do ratio. He hires managers who are owners, not employees. They have a deep-seated psychological need to produce results, not just talk about them. Their success is not measured by how many meetings they attend or how many presentations they give, but by the cash that their business generates. This relentless focus on tangible results creates a culture where talk is cheap and action is the only currency that matters. A practical mental model that any individual or team can use to cultivate this bias for effective action is the reversible versus irreversible decision framework. This model, popularized by Jeff Bezos but perfectly aligned with Buffett's thinking, helps to categorize decisions to determine how much deliberation they truly require. Step 1 is to ask of any decision, is this a Type 1 or a Type 2 decision? A Type 1 decision is irreversible. These are one-way doors. Once you walk through, you can't go back. Examples include selling your company, making a massive capital investment in a new factory, or hiring a key executive. These decisions have high, long-term consequences and deserve slow, careful, and deep deliberation. Though, importantly, this deliberation does not necessarily require a large meeting. Step 2 is to identify Type 2 decisions. These are reversible. They are two-way doors. If you make the wrong choice, you can easily go back and try something else. Examples include testing a new marketing headline, trying a different sales script, or reorganizing a small internal team. The vast majority of decisions in any business are Type 2 decisions. The blueprint is as follows. Once a decision has been identified as Type 2, it should be made quickly by a single individual or a small team without the need for broad consensus or multiple layers of approval. This framework is a powerful antidote to organizational paralysis. It empowers individuals to act and experiment, and it saves the heavy artillery of group deliberation for the very few decisions that truly warrant it. It is a system for killing bureaucracy at its root by short-circuiting the need for most meetings before they are ever even scheduled. The antithesis of this action-oriented culture is the soul-crushing bureaucracy of the CYA culture. CYA stands for Cover Your Ass, and it is the unofficial operating principle of many large organizations. In this culture, the primary motivation of employees is not to achieve the best outcome for the company, but to avoid being blamed for a bad outcome. And the single greatest tool for avoiding blame is the meeting. A decision made by an individual is risky. If it fails, that individual is accountable. But a decision made by a committee of 12 people following a series of alignment meetings and documented in a shared PowerPoint deck? Now, responsibility is so diffused that no one is truly accountable. The meeting becomes a form of insurance against failure. Consider a large consumer goods company trying to launch a new product. The product concept is innovative, but it has to go through the stage gate approval process. This involves meetings with marketing, sales, legal, finance, and supply chain. Each department has the power to raise objections or demand changes. The marketing team worries the name is too edgy. Legal is concerned about a minor potential claim. Finance wants to cut the budget for high-quality ingredients. After 6 months of death by committee, the product finally launches. It is a shadow of its former self. Its name is bland, its features are compromised, and its quality is mediocre. It fails in the market, and who is to blame? No one. The process was followed. Everyone signed off. The CYA culture successfully protected the employees, but it killed the product and destroyed shareholder value. The direct financial connection of Buffett's action-oriented culture is the immense competitive advantage of speed. In nearly every industry, speed to market is a critical determinant of success. The company that can develop and launch a new feature, respond to a customer complaint, or pivot its strategy faster than its competitors will inevitably capture more market share and generate higher profits. Bureaucracy is the enemy of speed. It is a giant anchor of meetings, approvals, and consensus building that slows an organization to a crawl. Buffett's model of decentralization, trust, and individual accountability is an engine of speed. By empowering a CEO of a subsidiary like Dairy Queen to make decisions about their own menu and marketing without needing approval from Omaha, he allows them to operate at the speed of a startup, even though they are part of a massive conglomerate. Let's quantify this. If Company A, operating on Buffett's model, can take a new product from idea to market in 6 months, while its bureaucratic competitor, Company B, takes 18 months to navigate the same process, Company A gets a full year of sales, customer feedback, and brand building before Company B even shows up to the game. That 1-year head start can be the difference between market leadership and irrelevance. The financial value of that speed is not just the revenue from that first year. It is the entire long-term stream of cash flows that comes from establishing a dominant market position. This is the ultimate financial payoff of a culture that values action over performance, results over ritual, and an empty calendar over a full one. You have just been given the blueprint for reclaiming the most valuable non-renewable asset you possess, your time. You now understand the deep logic behind Buffett's empty calendar. It's not about laziness, it's about the ruthless protection of focus, the strategic deployment of trust, and the creation of a culture of action. You've seen how these principles of decentralization, hiring for character, and communicating with purpose are not just folksy wisdom, but a sophisticated and interconnected system for building an efficient and enduring business empire. You have acquired a powerful mental tool to diagnose the dysfunction in your own work environment, and a practical set of models to begin fighting back against the tyranny of the pointless meeting. But this philosophy of radical autonomy is only possible because it rests on another, equally powerful pillar of Buffett's system: his method for evaluating the intrinsic value of a business before he ever even considers the people running it. Trusting the wrong person with a bad business is a recipe for disaster. Trusting the right person with a bad business is merely a slower, more painful path to the same destination. The principles you've learned today are the how to structure an organization for maximum efficiency and trust, but they are incomplete without the what. What makes a business so fundamentally sound, so durable, with such a powerful competitive moat, that it's worth trusting someone to run it in the first place? The video on your screen right now is the next piece of that map. It is the crucial bridge between the art of management and the science of valuation. It connects the decentralized operational style you've just mastered with the ironclad financial discipline that underpins the entire Berkshire Hathaway empire. Understanding one without the other gives you only half of the equation. You've already proven you're not interested in the surface-level advice. You're here to understand the foundational principles of wealth and success. You've invested this time to learn the deep structure of genius. Don't stop now. Complete your mental arsenal. The choice to click is not about watching another video. It is a commitment to finishing the intellectual journey you have started. It is the next step in becoming the kind of decision-maker who doesn't just manage their time, but masters their destiny. Click the video and continue your ascent.